This is the Pope lot that also has other generations with other names buried here. Moore, Stanley, and Strong. And this is the oldest monument on the lot, and it's called a Head and Shoulders monument. And you don't find many of these in Victorian cemeteries because these are pre-Victorian. These people died in 1829 and 1833, but it does give you the opportunity of seeing the earlier style. This is the head and the shoulders. A slender, upright monument. Then down at the far corner of the lot, you have the graves of General Burwell Pope. That's B-U-R-W-E-L-L, but you just sort of roll over the W. And he was a soldier in the War of 1812. His wife, Sarah Strong, was the daughter of Charles Strong, who's buried on the back of the lot, and he was a soldier of the American Revolution. One of the daughters of the family married Marcellus Stanley, who was an officer in the Confederate Army. So we have a lot of different wars represented in this lot. A lot of American history was lived by the people who are buried here. Right up until relatively recent times, I knew some of the people who are buried here. They were fellow members of the Athens Historical Society after I got in 1967. So the lot covers quite a number of decades. This mausoleum was bought for Captain Nathaniel White Hunter. He was a native of Georgia, a graduate of the Military Academy at West Point, and he was in the 2nd Regiment of the Dragoons in the Mexican War. Soon after the Mexican War, he was in Charleston when he got sick and died, and they wanted to bring his body back to Georgia to bury it. So, and he died in the month of April the 25th, so it was already getting warm in Charleston in Georgia. So they wrapped his casket in sheets of lead to keep the air away from it. As long as you can keep air away from the body, it does not mortify. So that was done. It is interesting that this mausoleum has stood in 2 different places. It was originally in Oglethorpe County, and then later it was brought into Athens when the family relocated in Athens. Well, I guess it's been about 25 or 30 years ago that my telephone rang late one afternoon, and the caller identified himself as with the Athens police, and he said, there's been a break-in of one of the mausoleums over at Oconee Hill Cemetery, and we cannot find the sexton. And we understand you know a lot about the cemetery, and we need to contact the family. And I said, well, describe which mausoleum it is. And he did, and I said, there are no descendants of the people buried in that mausoleum, but Mr. John Bondurant is a relative, so call him. Well, at that time, Mr. Bondurant's daughter, Mary Bondurant Warren, and I brought tours through the cemetery quite often, and the next time we brought a tour, she had a key with her, and she unlocked the door to this, and I'm telling you, the women scattered all over this hillside. What you saw when this door swung open was a rack that caskets could be slid into from either side, and there was the casket that he had been buried in. And Mary Claire said that when she came over with the locksmith to secure this, that whoever broke in had torn into his casket. They had removed all of that lead wrapping, and that all of his bones were there, as well as his red beard, and he was buried in his blue uniform because he died in the 1840s, long before the Civil War, so he was buried in his federal uniform. His wife lived through the Civil War and many years afterwards and outlived the family fortune, and she was buried in a wooden box. All that was left of her remains were a few pieces of the wood and a bone or two. So it really shows the difference in keeping the air away. Now, a short time after the first break-in, there was a second break-in, and that time they stole the skull of the man. And it appeared in the Athens newspaper that it was rumored that he had died of anthrax, a germ that never dies. And so far, nobody's tampered with this mausoleum since then.